Okay, let me start. So like earlier day, what I told that I'll be completing the presentations. Then I'll be demonstrating some of the clinical procedures, clinical examinations on volunteer, because in headache, the clinical examination part was very minimal. Mostly headache diagnosis is done by history itself. Already I told you that day. But in shoulder, there are a lot of special clinical tests. So that need to be demonstrated on the volunteers. So I'll be demonstrating that on the volunteers. And then I'll be asking accepting the questions from you. So still now, let me complete the presentation first. So can you see this 3D anatomy model? Yes. Okay. So first I'll be starting with this 3D anatomy model, showing you the different muscles, the joints, the ligaments, and then I'll be coming to the main presentations. So the shoulder joint, if we are removing the skin, then there are several muscles. The very important muscle is covering the whole of this. The shoulder joint is your deltoid. So anteriorly, the anterior head, then the medial, and then posteriorly you are having the posterior. So this is the posterior head, this is the medial head, and this is the anterior head of the deltoid. And if you are looking from the top, this is your trapezius, and anteriorly we are having the pectoralis major and platysma muscles here. So let me remove this deltoid muscles. This is the anterior head. Let me hide it. Then this is your middle head. Let me hide it. And this is your posterior head. Again, let me remove it. So now what is coming? Now the shoulder joint is exposed. But for better exposure, I'm also removing this, the pectoralis major. And also this is what muscle? Which muscle? This is the biceps. So this is your long head of the biceps. Already we have discussed earlier also that this long head of the biceps goes intra-articular within the capsule, and then it is attached at the glenoid labrum. So this is your long head, and this is your short head of the biceps, which is getting attached at the coracoid process. So let me remove particularly let me remove the short head, and let me remove the coracobrachialis as well, so that the other muscles will be exposed nicely. Latissimus dorsi also I am removing. So now we are trying to see the from the superior. Let me remove the trapezius also, platysma also. Now shoulder joint is now nicely exposed. So very important, the shoulder muscles are the rotator cuff muscles. So majority, the most common pathologies in the shoulder joint, the most common painful conditions of the shoulder joint are, around these 4 rotator cuff muscles. So the rotator cuff muscles, tendinopathies, tendinosis, the tear, and there are several bursa under these muscles which are the major causes of the shoulder pain. We'll be discussing that, the causes of the shoulder pain, very soon, but not just now. We are talking about the anatomical part. So, okay, let me remove this pectoralis minor also. So now, what is this muscle? This is your subscapularis. So subscapularis is, what is the origin and insertion? Origin is from the anterior surface of the scapula and inserted at the lesser tubercle. So what is its action? Action is internal rotation. So anteriorly you are having subscapularis. Now if you are looking from the top, then so we will be remembering like this. Anteriorly you are having the subscapularis. From the top we are having the supraspinatus, and from the posterior we are having 2. One is infraspinatus, another is your teres minor. And also you should know the nerve supply and the root value of these nerves as well. So the subscapularis, there is a subscapularis nerve. upper and lower, and the root value is C5-6. Remember, the 5-6 is the most of these muscles, our root value is having 5-6. So if you are remembering the dermatome and myotome is not exactly the same, but similar. So dermatome is up to the shoulder tip, so it is your C4. Then from shoulder tip up to the elbow lateral side of the arm, it is your C5. And C6 is from your elbow up to the thumb, this is your lateral side of the forearm, is your C6. And if you are looking about the, I'll be talking about when we'll be showing the innervations also. So there are 3 important nerves, which is innervating. I'll be talking later on as well. So just for the remember, the one is your the axillary. Again, I'm talking about the innervation as well as the sensory supply, as well as the nociceptive supply, as well as the motor supply. One I told about the nerve to the subscapular. That is a major motor that don't have any nociceptive supply of the shoulder joint. So this is your anteriorly. Then the axillary nerve. Axillary nerve is from the laterally. Axillary nerve is supplying 2 important muscles around the nerve. One very important nerve is your deltoid, supplied by axillary. Axillary root value is your 5-6. And it also having the sensory supply to the glenohumeral joint. So if you wish to denervate for the painful conditions of the shoulder joint, axillary nerve articular branch is one of the very, very important. Okay, so this is here from the laterally, and from posteriorly we are having suprascapular nerve. So suprascapular nerve root value is again C5-6, and the suprascapular nerve is mostly supplying the innervating the posteriorly, and it also supplies the 2 important muscle, supraspinatus and infraspinatus. Okay, so the rotator cuff muscles, anteriorly we are having the subscapularis, superiorly we are having the supraspinatus. So the suprascapular nerve is innervating this supraspinatus, and it is, what is the function? Where it is getting attached? It is attached in the greater tuberosity, and the greater tuberosity we are having the 3 muscles. You should be remembering SIT, sit, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor. Supraspinatus and infraspinator nerve supply is your suprascapular. Root value is 5-6, and teres minor is supplied by axillary. Again, root value is 5-6. So the supraspinatus, what is its function? Its function is, because it is supplied to the greater tuberosity, so external rotation is one of the function, but at the same time it is also the abductor of the shoulder. Okay, so the abductor of the shoulder, the strongest abductor, the initial part of the abduction is by deltoid, but the rest part of the abduction is by, particularly the middle part of the abduction, you should be remembering that the middle part of the abduction is by the supraspinatus. The supraspinatus is coming from top, so it is the abductor. And if you are looking from posteriorly, so you are having the 2 muscles, infraspinatus and teres minor, and they are the external rotator. Nerve supply, teres minor is axillary and infraspinatus is suprascapular. Okay, so let me repeat once again. So you should be remembering it, no need to read again. So 4 rotator cuff muscles. Anteriorly we are having the subscapularis. Origin is anterior surface of the scapula. Insertion is your lesser tuberosity. Action is internal rotation. So to test this muscle, so we have to ask the patient to do the internal rotation against resistance. And there is one very important clinical test, funny test, belly press testing. Press the belly. So it will be by subscapularis muscle. And nerve supply is subscapular nerve, and root value is 5-6. So this is from anterior. Then from top we are having supraspinatus. It is inserted the greater tuberosity, and its action is abduction mid part of the abduction and external rotation. It is attached at the greater tuberosity, and supply is supraspinatus, suprascapular, and it is supplying the supraspinatus muscle as well as the infraspinatus. Root value is again 5-6. The infraspinatus is again the infraspinatus post of the scapula, and it is attached at the greater tuberosity. Action is external rotation along with the tibia spine. Okay, so these are the 4 important rotator cuff muscles and its function. Okay, so now let me remove this subscapularis, and there is very important bursa there, subscapularis bursa. So many times it is just below the coracoid process, below the coracoid process, and many times there is accumulation of the fluid. In our just 1 month back, we had a aspiration of this in our YouTube channel. This it is there, USG guided aspiration of the subscapularis bursa. So you can see that in our YouTube channel. So this is one of the important source of the pain, as well as the subscapularis tendinopathies are also important source of the pain. Then we are having some very few important ligaments. So let me talk about the bursa, then we'll be talking about the ligaments. Next important bursa is your this one. What is this? This is your subacromial bursa. This is also called subdeltoid bursa because just on the top of it is your deltoid muscles. And this bursa is your this actually subacromial subdeltoid bursa is a continuous one. No, so this part is just below the acromial, so it is called subacromial. This is called subdeltoid. But many of the times we together called subdeltoid subacromial bursa because this is basically the continuous one. And there was another bursa that is your in the superficial. I have removed that at the beginning. So that is your subcutaneous bursa over the acromial. So these are the few bursas, but again below the infraspinatus also there is a small bursa. So remember the rotator cuff muscles below it is having the below or above it having the different bursa. So they are the most important bursa which are actually having the pain is this one, the subacromial, subdeltoid. I told you these are the showing it 2 different bursa, but it's basically continuous bursa. And anteriorly we are having the subscapularis bursa. Now let me remove this bursa, and our ligaments will be exposed. So few of the ligaments are very, very important, and so these ligaments we must be knowing. So one of the ligament is your this one. What is this? Transverse humerus ligament, and it produces a tunnel between the 2 tuberosity in the the humeral head through which the long head of the biceps is moving. So this the tunnel is formed by the transverse humerus ligament, and you see if you're looking about its positions, it is transversely placed, whereas many times we are having the confusion, and this is anterior, and on the top is your coracohumeral ligament. Coracohumeral ligament is very important. This is little bit of oblique, and this is not exactly anterior. If you're looking by the ultrasonography, you have to put it from the top. Then you can see the coracohumeral ligament better. Coracohumeral ligament is very important because they are the 2 ligaments, the coracohumeral ligament and the coracoacromial ligament. They are the 2 important ligaments which are thickened in frozen shoulder. Okay, so these are the two ligaments. Many times we look at these 2 ligaments to see its thickness, to understand whether the patient is having the frozen shoulder. By looking at the measurement, we can understand that. And if we are removing these, another very important source of the pain, I'm removing the humerus, and if you can see, so this is your labrum. This is your glenoid labrum. Reticular capsule. This is your scapulabrum. Labrum is basically the cartilaginous, fibrocartilaginous structures around the labrum. I cannot show you here. This is basically around the margin of the glenoid, the cup, glenoid labrum. There are a lot of other injuries, or even the repetitive injury, or even without any history of the trauma, there might be having the labral tears, which is also very important cause of the glenohumeral pain. Okay, so with this little bit of anatomy, We are now going into the presentation. And remember, shoulder joint is very, very important. The two important joint pain very frequently comes to pain clinic. One is knee joint pain, another is your shoulder joint pain. These two joint pain is very important. Other pain is, I'm not talking that it is not important, like hip, ankle, wrist, elbow, all are important. But out of all those large joints, the hip and knee and shoulder are very, very important. Okay, and you can remember the steps of clinical evaluation, same for all the areas. So what are those? Let us recapitulate. First is, we need to remember the list of causes of pain. So here first we'll be discussing what are the causes of shoulder pain, classifying the shoulder pain, and then we'll be discussing what are the red flags, which causes are dangerous, where we need to have immediately refer these patients to orthopedic surgeon or neurosurgeon, or we might be having a team to manage this kind of patients whenever there is a possibility of red flag. Even if we are not sure about the presence of the red flag, even if we are suspecting it, we must be having a team, or we must be referring these patients to our orthopedic surgeon colleague. And then what are the steps? After having the list and the red flag, then you should be starting with the history. In the history, first is your general history. General history, what was the list? Starting from the chief complaint. Along with the chief complaint, there might be one or two more complaints in the chief complaint list with duration. Then comes history of present illness. In the history of present illness, we are having the assessment of the quantity of the pain or the severity of the pain, then the quality of the pain, then aggravating factors, relieving factors, then your diurnal variations. So all these radiations, the chronicities, so all those things are in the history of present illness. After that, we are having the medical history, family history, personal history, occupational history, psychological history. Psychological history is very, very important. Psychological assessment, all should be coming by the history itself. And then we'll be asking certain specific questions. For each area of the pain, we should be having some specific questions. The specific questions is very important for your headache. Why? Because headache is almost entirely diagnosed by your history. So the list of the specific histories according to the diagnostic criteria, we should be always asking. This specific history list is not very big in the other areas of the pain. Okay, but in headache, this is very important. And then we'll be coming into the examinations. In the examinations, first is quick general survey, general examinations of all the system. And then we'll be starting with the specific area like shoulder. We'll be starting with the inspection, palpation, range of movement, neurological examinations. Neurological examinations is again the whole range of the neurological examinations, and then specific clinical test, special clinical test. And then comes is your investigations. In the investigations, we are having the laboratory investigations. We are having the different kinds of image. In shoulder, ultrasound is very, very important, as well as the MRI is also important. But ultrasound is very important. And remember, without ultrasound, the musculoskeletal pain evaluation is incomplete. All kind of musculoskeletal pain evaluation must be completed with the ultrasound. Here in clinical method classes, we are not talking about the ultrasound evaluation, but remember that it is, ultrasound is called the stethoscope of a pain physicians. So without ultrasound, we cannot complete the evaluation process. So ultrasound evaluation is very, very important. And after that, we are having another very important step. What is that? That is your diagnostic interventions. So after all these things, you still might be having some doubts about where is the source of the pain. And to clarify it, you just inject local anesthetic into that structure or into the nerve, supplying that structure, and see how much pain relief is there. And that can be a confirmatory test in many of the situations. And that completes our whole of the evaluation process. but we'll be restricting only up to the clinical examinations part, up to the special test. So now let us see what are the, so this anatomy knowledge, I'm just skipping these slides. Just because already I have discussed all these things. So these are the rotator cuff muscles also I have discussed. Now I'm coming into the directly into the causes. So the causes broadly classified into non-traumatic and traumatic. So in non-traumatic, we are having intrinsic. Intrinsic means which is coming from the shoulder joint itself. Okay, I forgot to mention that shoulder joint is not a single joint. Shoulder joint is composed of 4 important joints. What are those 4 joints? One is glenohumeral joint, that is the most important joint. Then the 3 other joints. One is your acromioclavicular joint. Another is your scapulothoracic joint. Scapulothoracic joint is a false joint. It is not a true joint. It is between the thoracic cage and the scapula, anterior surface of the scapula, and your sternoclavicular joint. Sternoclavicular joint is most medial, but that is also considered by some book, not all book. They consider also sternoclavicular joint is also a part of the shoulder joint. But some literature do not support it. Some literature says it is the 3 joints, means the glenohumeral, the acromioclavicular, and your scapulothoracic joint. So intrinsic means we are talking about the shoulder pain coming from the shoulder joint, means it can be glenohumeral, it can be acromioclavicular, it can be all those other parts of the shoulder joint. That is called your intrinsic. And extrinsic means outside these 3 joints, means it is coming from the shoulder joint, it is coming from the, the referred pain coming from the, one of the very important is your gallbladder. Gallbladder pain can be referred into the shoulder. We have all read it, we know this. So any upper abdominal pathologies, pain can be referred in the shoulder. Chest pathologies, pain can be referred in the shoulder. And how can we explain this? Why this thoracic and the abdominal visceral pain can be referred to the shoulder? What is the answer? Answer is by the same segmental innervation. If we are remembering, what are the innervations of the abdominal viscera for the nociceptive pain? It is coming from T5 to T12. Now, if you are looking about the thoracic viscera, how they are innervated? They are innervated by sympathetic nerve, which is coming from T1 to T5. If you are looking about the innervation of the head and neck, it is coming from T1 to T3. If you are talking about the upper limb innervation, the sympathetic nerves is coming from T2 to T8. So you understand the shoulder, if you are considering is a part of the upper limb, that means it is the innervated sympathetic nerve is coming from, I'm talking about the sympathetic innervation. I'm not talking about the, the somatic innervation. Somatic innervation is by C5 to T1 upper limb, and fibers might be coming from C4 as well as T2, but mostly by the brachial plexus, that is C5 to T1. But I'm talking about the sympathetic nerve. Sympathetic nerve supplies by segments from T2 to T8, and thoracic viscera innervation sympathetic fibers coming from T1 to T5, and abdominal T5 to T12. So you see, T5 fibers are supplying abdomen, thoracic area, as well as upper limb. Okay, T3 fibers supplying thoracic viscera, head and neck, and as well as the upper limb. So because of this same segmental innervation, if there is pathology, painful conditions in the abdomen, particularly the upper abdomen and the thoracic areas, the pain might be referred into the upper limb and shoulder. Okay, so this is very, very important. We must be also knowing the reasons, explanation why thoracic or abdominal visceral pain can be referred in the upper limb or in the shoulder. So intrinsic, extrinsic. First was your traumatic, non-traumatic. In the traumatic, we are having the fractures, fracture of the humerus, fracture of the clavicle, acromioclavicular joint, the ligament sprain, dislocations, Even the labral tear can be in your traumatic. In the non-traumatic, we are having the glenohumeral. That is the major. In the non-traumatic, intrinsic, extrinsic. Extrinsic means it is a referred pain coming from the other part, apart from the shoulder joint, 3 joints, or 4 joints of the shoulder, apart from that part. So most common referred area, remember, is from the cervical area. Cervical facet, remember the 3 things, very, very important, referred pain in the shoulder. And in our clinical practice, many times we are having the confusion. One is the shoulder, up to shoulder is your C4 nerve root, shoulder to arm is your lateral part of the arm is your C5. So C4 and C5 radicular pain is felt along the shoulder. Okay, then is your the facet joint. Cervical facet joint, particularly the lower cervical. As a rule, you should be remembering the upper cervical facet joint, particularly the C2, C3, and C3, C4, they are presenting as a headache. Whereas C3, 4 can be in the neck as well as the headache. Even up to the shoulder, it can come. There is a lot of overlapping. Some pictures are there, but there is a lot of overlapping. That is not a rule. By that, you cannot make a diagnosis. But that is just for easy to remember is upper cervical is present with the headache. Lower cervical presents with the pain in the shoulder, in the upper arm, as well as the upper back, up to the mid back. So this is the referred area of the cervical facet. So the shoulder pain, the very common reason is your referred pain because of the facet pain. And third most important is your myofascial pain, particularly the trapezius myofascial pain and some other myofascial pain like supraspinatus, infraspinatus. All these things can be presenting with the referred pain into the shoulder. So there are a few other, just go through that, but these are the referred areas, extrinsic causes of the shoulder pain. Intrinsic cause, most important is your glenohumeral. And in the glenohumeral, what are the causes again? In the glenohumeral joint, we are having the rotator cuff. Your glenohumeral arthritis is the less common cause. You have to remember that. Like knee joint, commonest cause is your osteoarthritis knee. But the glenohumeral osteoarthritis, glenohumeral joint osteoarthritis is not that common. More common of the glenohumeral joint is your frozen shoulder, rotator cuff tendinopathies. They are the common causes. And extra glenohumeral, very important is your 2 important things you remember in the extra glenohumeral. One is your acromioclavicular and is your bicipital. So the other 2 important in the extra glenohumeral causes, right? So now let us see the red flags. Red flags is almost similar almost in everywhere. If you're suspecting a tumor, particularly if you're suspecting tumor of the thoracic area that can be presenting with the shoulder pain. Sometimes there is other pain where there is a metastasis in the humeral head. That is not uncommon. If there is a dislocation, if there is a fracture, if there is an infection, septic arthritis, though it is rare, but still we should be remembering all those causes. If there is an sensory or motor deficits, particularly because of the radiculopathy, and if there is any having the chest, other causes which is causing the pulmonary and the vascular compromise because of the chest pathologies, myocardial infection. Myocardial infection also can present with the acute pain around the shoulder. Referred pain, myocardial infection, referred pain can be coming into the shoulder as well as in the hand. So these are the red flags, and here red flags some red flags are same in everywhere. Means infection, the major trauma, the tumor. Here you have to remember some other red flags, chest pathology and upper abdominal pathologies. So this also can be red flag here in this shoulder pain. Now let us come to the history. History, I'm not going into the detail of all those things. So we have to remember almost the similar kind of things. Already I have discussed about all those things. Let me come directly into the examinations part. Examinations part, the inspection, palpation, range of movement, the neurological examinations, the special clinical test. And in the special clinical test, we are having the 5 different kinds of clinical test. One is test for the impingement. There are few other tests of impingement is there. I have just given here the common, the clinical test. There are a long list of clinical tests, very difficult to remember all those clinical tests, but just remember one or two for different kinds of pathologies. So the test of impingement, there are two important impingements. One important impingement is the acromial impingement, subacromial impingement, particularly the supraspinatus muscles is gliding just below the acromion. So, that is, if the supraspinatus muscle cannot glide nicely, that is one of the impingement. And another important impingement is the coracoid, subcoracoid. That is your subscapularis muscle is gliding below the coracoid. So pathologies in the subscapularis muscle can be responsible for the subcoracoid impingement. So these are the two impingement tests. Rotator cuff test, again, there is a long list. So here there is two tests. Another test I'll be telling, which is not enumerated here. So one is your drop arm test to understand whether the supraspinatus muscle is there, external rotator lag sign for the infraspinatus and the teres minor, test for the instability. So apprehension, relocation, anterior release, all are actually done in sequence, three tests. Test for the AC joint and test for the bicipital tendon. I'll be coming into the detail of all those things, and I'll be also demonstrating on the volunteer. Okay, so first step is inspection. So you should be exposing the area nicely, and we should be trying to understand some of the bony landmarks, like tip is your acromion. You can see the clavicles also. You can see the posteriorly the spine of the scapula, the edge of the scapula. So you should be remembering also the muscle, the covered wholly by your deltoid muscle. Here is your supraspinatus muscles, here is your trapezius muscles, and below the spine of the scapula, this is spine of the scapula, below is your the infraspinatus muscle. Infraspinatus and teres minor might be difficult to differentiate clinically because they are very close. So these are the inspection. Then comes palpation. So in the inspection, so these are the things already I have enumerated. What are the things to inspect? Then comes is your palpation. In the palpation, we should be remembering this way, that the palpation of the bones, joints, muscle, tendons, bursa. So bones and joints, already we told what bones we can see. Anteriorly you can see the clavicle, you can see the acromion. So we should be palpating acromion, we should be palpating clavicle, and some of the joints. The sternoclavicular, already told, that is one of the part of the shoulder joint. So you can palpate that. Acromioclavicular joint from the top, from the above. Then your glenohumeral joint, anteriorly as well as the posteriorly, you can palpate the glenohumeral joint. And cervical facet joints also should be coming on because as I told you, that is one of the very common causes of the shoulder pain, cervical facet joints. So these are the bones and joints. Then important part of the palpation is your muscle, tendons, bursa. So as I already mentioned, that the muscle tendons are very important because tendinopathies are one of the very common cause of the shoulder pain, as well as another important cause of the pain is your myofascial pain. So when you are palpating the muscles, our aim is to palpate bulk of the muscle to understand that if there is any trigger point, as well as the insertion point. Insertion point is for the tender point. I explained this difference earlier day, that the myofascial pain is at the bulk of the muscle, belly of the muscle, which is producing the trigger point. So trigger point and tender point, how to differentiate? One is your trigger point is situated in the bulk or belly of the muscles, and very commonly they'll be having the referred pain distally. So this is your trigger point. And tender point, it is at the tendinous part. In fact, the tendon is inserted on the bone, so that part will be tender, and that is called tender point. And that is present in the tendinopathies or enthesitis, particularly enthesiopathies, particularly in the spondyloarthropathy. So inflammatory arthropathies, one important group is your rheumatoid arthritis, which majority involved in the synovial part, synovium of the joint. So that is one kind of inflammatory arthropathies. Another kind of inflammatory arthropathy is here called spondyloarthropathy. In the spondyloarthropathy, what is involved? It is the enthesis. What is enthesis? Enthesis is the soft tissue where the tendons or capsules or the ligaments are attached into the bone. The soft tissue around it is called the enthesis. So in the spondyloarthropathy, spondyloarthropathy includes ankylosing spondyloarthropathy is a group of disease where there is ankylosing spondylitis, psoriatic arthritis, reactive arthritis. These are the three major arthritis, inflammatory arthritis under the heading of spondyloarthritis. So the spondyloarthritis mostly involves the large joint, and spondyloarthritis causes enthesitis, and that is the soft tissue around where it is inserted into the bone. So if you understand the difference between the rheumatoid arthritis and the spondyloarthritis. So rheumatoid arthritis, it is a synovitis, and in spondyloarthritis, it is the enthesitis. So this is the major difference between these two the disease conditions. Anyway, coming back to our discussions, that in the palpations, we should be palpating both the muscle as well as we'll be palpating the insertion, tendinous insertion, that is important for the enthesitis or tendinopathies. Okay, so we are having all these different muscles already have discussed. We have to palpate all those muscles as well as the bursa around it. So in bursitis also, those we should be knowing the location of the bursa. Particularly, I told the two bursa. One is your subacromial, subdeltoid bursa, another is subscapularis bursa. So these bursas should be palpated for any tenderness or not. Okay, so this is your inspection, then is your palpation. Then comes is your range of motion. And very important is both active as well as the passive. So you should be asking the patient to move it, and you should be helping this. So sometimes weakness or pain, patient may not be able to have the full range of motions, but when you are assisting it, so passive movement is possible. So what are the different kinds of movement? One is your flexion extension. So flexion extension and abduction adduction. And abduction flexion extension also in the horizontal positions, means after you are abducting it 90 degree, then also flexion extension. So flexion extension in adducted position and flexion extension in horizontal abducted positions. Then is your internal rotation, external rotation, and internal rotation, external rotation in the 90 degree abducted positions. So 90 degree abducted position also you should be having the internal external rotations, or adducted and internal rotation, external rotation. I'll be showing all these in the volunteer. And one of the test is very popular test is your Apley scratch test. This is one of the important for the range of motions. So we are having that's like scratching our the back, and that is one of the very important test. Earlier, the Apley scratch test was considered to be very important for the frozen shoulder. But nowadays, it has been known that the full range of movement motion is not important for the the frozen shoulder. For the frozen shoulder, very important, the ligaments, as we told already, is your thickening of the coracohumeral ligament, and for that, external rotation is important. So external rotation will be restricted in the frozen shoulder. That is one of the earliest sign of the frozen shoulder, and that is restricted by the thickening of the tender coracohumeral ligament. Okay. Anyway, the Apley scratch test is also important. Particularly, the Apley scratch test is important in the later stage of the frozen shoulder. So this is your range of movement, and range of movement should be tested both active range of movement as well as the passive range of movement. Then comes is your neurological examinations. As I told, neurological examinations should be started quick. Cranial nerve examinations, higher function tests that should be assessed when you are talking with the patient itself. And then your sensory motor, in the motor, the power, the tone, to understand the upper motor neuron lesion, lower motor neuron lesion, and reflexes. So first is your sensory. And here again, we should be remembering the difference between the dermatomal distribution and the nerve distribution. Root distribution and the nerve distribution. They are not the same. So here what we have shown is your nerve distribution. And dermatomal distribution, already I told, dermatomal distributions anteriorly up to the shoulder is your 4, C4, lateral side is your the C5 and then C6. Now coming to the nerve distributions, anterior part from the top to anterior part is here by the supraclavicular nerve. The posterior part is by the suprascapular nerve, and the lateral part is by the axillary nerve. So three important nerves around the shoulder. Again, let us repeat: anteriorly, and all root value is 5, 6 except suprascapular. Suprascapular is mostly the top and the anterior, top and anterior, and that is root value is your 4, 5. And posterior part is by suprascapular, that is by 5, 6, and lateral by axillary, again by 5, 6. But here, remember very important difference, and remember another important nerve for the glenohumeral. So glenohumeral innervation is by articular branches of the three important nerves. What are those nerves? One nerve is your suprascapular nerve. Suprascapular nerves comes from posteriorly. Earlier we used to do the suprascapular nerve block at the notch, but those are obsolete. In shoulder pain, very soon this will be coming as a history book, that suprascapular nerve block was once upon a time done for the shoulder pain. So these are not the recent one. So the suprascapular nerve block, why it is not important? Because suprascapular nerve block, if you are blocking at the level of the the scapular notch, so this nerve has very important motor nerve innervation. So that is your infraspinatus. After it passes, if you are blocking at the the suprascapular notch, then might be the supply to the supraspinatus is spared, but your infraspinatus muscles definitely will be, if you are blocking that nerve, if you are doing the neurolysis, you are weakening the infraspinatus. So that is the reason why we nowadays do not block supraspinatus nerve at the suprascapular notch. So where we should be doing it? At the just medial, already in the who was there in the USG class. So the spinous glenoid notch just lateral to the sphenoglenoid fossa, where just lateral to the glenoid. So there is a fossa, and the articular branches passes through that. Just medial to the glenoid labrum, the glenoid margin. So this suprascapular nerve, after leaving its muscular branch to the infraspinatus muscle, it innervates from the medial side of the posteriorly medial side of the glenohumeral joint, and our target is there. After when all the muscular branches are left, and you can easily denervate the nerve there. So it can be done both by the ultrasonography guidance, or it can be done by your CM guidance. Both can be done, and that is one of the very important way to do the the suprascapular nerve block. But remember, suprascapular nerve block is one of the three nerves which are important nociceptive nerve for the glenohumeral joint. What are the other two nerves? Second one is your axillary nerve, articular branches of the axillary nerve. Again, axillary nerve has a lot of important supply. Deltoid muscle, teres minor, some other muscles are also there by the axillary nerve. So again, axillary nerve block, particularly the denervation, neurolysis can be done only when all the muscular branches are actually went off. After that, you can do that. And that is normally done at the junction of the head and the shaft of the humerus on the lateral side. So at the junction of the head, and we might be discussing in some other classes where we might be discussing about the radio frequency. That time you can discuss it. But remember, this is another third. So posteriorly one nerve, laterally one nerve, that is the articular branch of the axillary nerve, and anteriorly another, that is your lateral pectoral nerve. So the lateral pectoral nerve also supplies the shoulder joint from anteriorly. So lateral pectoral nerve is the important nerve for the pectoralis muscle, and it gives off the articular branches. After we can denervate this nerve after it has muscular branches as given. After that, we can denervate this nerve on the tip of the coracoid process. So identify, this is a very easy block. So identify, you place the probe, USG probe, or you just focus it, serum, and you place your needle on the coracoid process, and you can denervate there, because over that, the articular branches of the lateral pectoral nerve block goes and innervates the glenohumeral joint from anteriorly. So this dermatomal and the glenohumeral nociceptive nerve is little bit different. So here supraclavicular nerve from anteriorly and top, posteriorly you are having the suprascapular, and laterally you are having the axillary. But glenohumeral joint itself, posteriorly articular branch of the suprascapular, from laterally articular branch of the axillary, and from anteriorly it is the articular branch of the lateral pectoral nerve. Okay, and all these articular branch can be innervated individually to give a very good pain relief, which is coming from the glenohumeral joint. And as I told you, the suprascapular nerve block at the suprascapular notch is obsolete. We cannot do that because it might be weakening the. I myself did a lot of cases, but nowadays for last 2 years we are not doing the suprascapular nerve block anymore in the supraspinatus, at the the notch. Okay, so this is your sensory supply. Then comes the motor. Again, the motor, as I told, you have to remember the 4 rotator cuff muscles as well as the deltoid muscle, which is covering all those. So deltoid, first part of the first 30 degree of the is by the deltoid abduction. It is by denervation is by another very simple, during the neck muscle examinations it was discussed that if we are shrugging the shoulder, elevating the shoulder, this is by C4. If we are abducting, this is by C5. Okay, so abduction is by C5, mostly by deltoid, and then comes is your few other rotator cuff muscles. One, in the picture you can see the empty can test. So what is empty can test? Again, this is very popular questions in different multiple choice question and the different other. Empty can test is, you see that we are trying to empty the can, like you are holding a bottle, and you are emptying. So how to empty that? So we are putting the thumb down. So you're holding it and putting the thumb down. That is, suppose we are having a can and we want to empty that. So we are doing like that. So putting the thumb downwards, if you are elevating, abducting, then it is the supraspinatus muscle. So supraspinatus muscle in the middle part of the abduction is by the supraspinatus, and examiners from standing from posteriorly will be pressing, resisting, and the patient will be asked to elevate the hand, keeping the thumb down. That is your empty can test, supraspinatus. Then is your belly press test. I was telling you, belly press test is your internal rotation, and that is by your subscapularis. And your resisted external rotation is by infraspinatus and teres minor. So these are the motor power of the 4 important rotator cuff muscles. And then is your reflex, biceps, brachioradialis, and triceps. So whole neurological examination, starting from the sensory, you should be looking for about if there is any neurodeficits. You should be touching the area. Most commonly, you are just touching. But if you want to be more precise, you just put your cotton, you put your even your test tube having the cold and hot water. But most commonly, you are not doing that. Just touching to do the sensory test, having the motor test with this different muscles and the reflexes to see whether there is any loss of charts. Now come the special test. So the special test, as I was telling, there is a long list of special tests. First is your test for the impingement. And as I told, the 2 important impingement, one is your subacromial impingement. So subacromial impingement is by need test. So you are just passively elevating it, and or you can do it both active and passive. And if your the impingement below the acromion, the supraspinatus muscles will be having the frictions because of tendinopathies, calcific tendinopathies, or some osteophytes in the subacromial area, or some bursa that might be preventing the smooth gliding of the supraspinatus muscles below the acromion. So this is the need test is for the subacromial impingement. Then is your Hawkins-Kennedy. So Hawkins-Kennedy, what you should do? We should be holding in 90-degree abducted positions, and then we'll be doing the internal rotation, external rotations. So this internal rotation is by subscapularis. So subscapularis muscles glides below the coracoid process. So this is your for the subcoracoid impingement. So these are the two common impingement tests, and will be coming later on that even the local anesthetic injection in this might be helpful in this impingement test. I'll be coming to that later on. Then is your rotator cuff test. Rotator cuff test for the supraspinatus. If there is a rotator cuff tear, then what will happen? Patient won't be able to hold this arm in the abducted positions, mid-abducted positions, because that is by the supraspinatus. So it will be dropping, and that is called drop arm test. So this drop arm test and the empty can test are similar. Drop arm test is complete tear, then there will be drop arm test. Drop arm will be dropped. But if it is incomplete tear or tendinopathies, then it will be painful. The active movement, and if you are resisting it, then it will be painful. But drop arm test and the empty can test is almost similar. Then is the external rotator lag test. So what is that? So here this picture is little bit of faulty. It should be little bit more abducted. It should be 90-degree abducted. But this is actually looking like the 60-degree abducted. I'll be showing you in the volunteer. So it should be 90-degree abducted, and then you are resisting it to as much as the external rotation is possible. So who is this external rotator? Is your intraspinatus and teres minor. So patient will be able to have these external rotations in the mid-arm abducted positions nicely if the intraspinatus and teres minor are working properly. But if they cannot, what will happen? They'll be springing back. Means patient will not be able to hold this in the external rotator positions in the mid-arm. That is called external. So if you're releasing your hand, if you're leaving your hand, just remember it is good, but only thing is it should be abducted a little bit up. And then the external rotations, ask the patient to external rotate. And if then you release your hand, it will be coming back. If there is a tear or tendinopathies, they cannot do the external rotation. Okay, so this is your external rotation lag sign. So these are the rotator cuff test. Then these are for the shoulder joint instability, but also these are also for the pain, particularly the glenohumeral pathologies. So how to do it? I'll be showing you on the volunteer again. But apprehension test is, so you are doing the similar kind of test, means 90-degree abductor and external rotation. So what will happen? And if you're pushing it from the posteriorly, if there is instability, particularly the joint capsule, then what will happen? The shoulder joint will be dislocated anteriorly. And that is your apprehension. Patient will not be allowing it, because patient know in that positions his joint will be dislocated. So this apprehension is called apprehension test. After that, so these three tests are in sequence. First is your apprehension, then is your dislocation, and then you are pushing back. Then the shoulder, if there is a dislocation, the shoulder joint will be pushed back. And if you are now releasing it again in the same position, then what will happen? Again, the shoulder joint, even if you are not pushing from posteriorly, in these positions, that means the 90-degree abducted, and if you are doing the external rotations, there will be apprehension of that it will be pushing forward. So anterior release test is after you are relocating. If you are releasing your hand, then there is again the chance that it will be again coming back anteriorly. So this is your anterior release test. So apprehension test, relocation test, and anterior release test is for the shoulder joint instability, dislocation, the laxed ligaments, as well as the glenohumeral pathology can produce pain here. Next is the test for the acromioclavicular joint. Acromioclavicular joint, the most important is your local tenderness over the acromioclavicular joint. So this is a very superficial joint. You can easily palpate it, and if you are finding any tenderness there, so that is one of the CRS. But there are two other other test, O'Brien test. This is not very the specific or sensitive test, but sometimes it is done. So how it is done? So you are the flexing anteriorly, and you are both in supine pronated position and the supinated positions. What you are doing, you are resisting it and not allowing, you are pressing it down, asking the patient to hold it in that position, 90-degree position, 90-degree flexion positions. So what will happen? There will be pain over the acromioclavicular joint. But this is also causes pain in the labral tear, in the glenohumeral pathology. So there the pain will be posteriorly, not superiorly on the top. The pain on this joint in these positions So this is your O'Brien test. But O'Brien test is another test which is called speed test. So speed test and O'Brien test are similar. I'm coming to the speed test again, and I'll be repeating it again on the volunteer. So don't worry. And as I told you, very difficult to remember all these long list. Remember one or two, and I'll be showing you on the volunteer again. So this is a speed test. As I told you, this test, that means in supinated position, if the patient is feeling pain on the acromioclavicular joint, this is your O'Brien test. But if in this position, if the patient is having pain over the bicipital groove, then it is your speed test. Okay, so it is almost same. So speed test is again in the supinated position. You are asking the patient to flex it, and if the patient is having pain on the bicipital groove, long head of the biceps, then that is your speed test. And Yergason test, what is that? So the biceps is also a supinator. So it is not only the flexure, but it is also supinator. So you are asking the patient to have the pronated positions, and you resist, don't allow the hand to supinate. So patient will be trying to supinate, and you will be resisting that. And if the patient is having pain over the, again, the the bicipital areas, then this is your Yergason test. So these are all different kinds of clinical tests. Again, I am telling you, very difficult to remember all those clinical tests, but at least remember some of these tests. And palpation is one of the very important to remember. Palpation, range of movement, they are very important. Also remember the different rotator cuff muscles, origin, insertion, nerve supply. That will be taking your, doing your job much easier. So now is your investigations. In the investigations, this long list of investigation, but I told you ultrasonography is very, very important. Without that, your examination is not complete. Now is your diagnostic interventions. Again, very, very important. One of the important, the extrinsic cause was your shoulder hand syndrome. I don't remember whether I talked it or not. So CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, particularly involving the shoulder and the hand, is also called the shoulder hand syndrome. So the whole, it will be non-dermatomal, whole of the hand and the shoulder will be involved. So this is a kind of sympathetically mediated pain, or the other signs of the CRPS will be there. There will be, the stiffness of the shoulder. There will be redness, color changes. The skin color will be changed. There will be change of the temperature. So all these other features of the CRPS will be there. And this is called shoulder hand syndrome. And here the diagnostic stellate ganglion block is going to help. If the diagnostic stellate ganglion block is relieving the pain, then you can confirm it that it is shoulder hand syndrome or CRPS involving the shoulder and the hand. There is a trigger point injection. If you are having the the tenderness or the bulk of the belly of the muscles, having the distal radiating pain, you can do a diagnostic trigger point injection and you can confirm your diagnosis. Then is your diagnostic selective nerve root block. If you are having the confusion that it might be a radicular pain, particularly the C4 and the C5 radicular pain, then we can do a diagnostic local anesthetic, small amount of the local anesthetic in the exiting nerve root, and that can, if relieving the pain, that confirms the radicular pain. Then is your local anesthetic for impingement. This is also very important. As I told you, that in just below the acromion, if you are giving the local anesthetic, and if the patient is having the good NIT test was painful, unable to do this, and now after giving the injection, patient can do it. That means is your subacromial impingement. Same, if you are giving the just below the coracoid, and if now patient is able to do the Hawkins-Kennedy test, that means the patient is having the subcoracoid impingement. So normally the impingement test, NIT test, and Hawkins-Kennedy test are best combined with the local anesthetic diagnostic block. If you're combining the both, that gives the best value. And sometimes suprascapular nerve block. But again, as I told you, this is obsolete nowadays. We are not doing it. We are doing only the articular branch of the subscapular. Okay. Now this is very, very important. Just look at this diagnostic algorithm carefully, and after that I'll be taking a few minutes break, and then I'll be showing on the volunteer. So the painful shoulder, first is whether there is any history of trauma or not. If there is any history of trauma, many times it is very difficult to move, and all the clinical examinations might not be possible. So the radiological investigation is very important. X-ray is the most commonly and the easiest available, but you can also do either CT scan or MRI. If it is possible, you can do that, but at least have an X-ray and see whether there is any dislocation, whether there is any fracture. If there is a dislocation fracture, immediately consult with your, refer this patient to your the orthopedic surgeon friend. If the X-ray is not showing, there is history of trauma, but not any, the fracture or dislocation, then very important is it will be almost similar evaluation like that of the atraumatic causes or non-traumatic causes. So there, one of you remember that the labral tear can be both because of the traumatic as well as the non-traumatic, but labral tear can be also by trauma, and labral tear, cannot be diagnosed by your, because it's not a bone. So the labral tear cannot be diagnosed with your X-ray or CT scan. By better diagnosed by your MRI, or sometimes by your ultrasonography also can be helpful in this diagnosis. Okay, now coming to the non-traumatic or atraumatic. So there, so you are having the extrinsic and intrinsic. So the intrinsic, we are grossly dividing into the glenohumeral and extraglenohumeral. So if it is an, the glenohumeral cause, so what will happen? So the extraglenohumeral cause, the passive movement is possible. Passive movement, you can do the passive movement, and mostly it is not painful. So even if it is painful, it will be a mild painful. But active range of movements might be restricted or might be free. But very important to differentiate is your passive movement will be painless if it is extraglenohumeral pathologies. Whereas if it is a glenohumeral pathologist, then both active as well as the passive movement will be restricted and painful. Okay, so extraglenohumeral causes, what we first, here is your glenohumeral causes. The glenohumeral causes, the very important is your the adhesive capsulitis or frozen shoulder, and is your the glenohumeral osteoarthritis. So glenohumeral osteoarthritis and the extraglenohumeral and the adhesive capsulitis, both are among the glenohumeral pathologies, and remember that is one of the commonest. So if you're talking about tell me that the commonest causes of the shoulder pain, one of them is frozen shoulder or adhesive capsulitis. Second is the rotator cuff tendinopathies, particularly the supraspinatus tendinopathies. Third one is the bursitis. Fourth one is your acromial clavicular joint osteoarthritis, and fifth the bicipital tendinopathies. So these are the 5 most common causes of the shoulder joint pain, and out of these, 2 are extraglenohumeral and rest are glenohumeral. Which 2 are extraglenohumeral? The AC joint and the bicipital is your extraglenohumeral, and other, that means your frozen shoulder, the rotator cuff tendinopathies and the bursitis, these are coming in this extraglenohumeral. Okay, so this is your the list algorithms, and I'll be showing you in the volunteer. Extraglenohumeral, again the bicipital and the AC joint. The test already you have discussed about this and this, and remember, as I already told you, the ultrasonography is very, very important. Almost all of these pathologies can be diagnosed nicely by the ultrasonography. And the osteoarthritis of the glenohumeral joint is a uncommon cause of the shoulder pain. So many times we talk about osteoarthritis of the shoulder joint, osteoarthritis of the glenohumeral joint. That is not a common cause. So remember these 5 common cause of the shoulder pain. Again, let me repeat: frozen shoulder, then is the rotator cuff tendinopathies, then is your bursitis, then is your AC joint osteoarthritis or AC joint arthropathies, and then is the bicipital tendinopathies. So these are the 5 common causes of the other causes we have already enumerated, but remember always these 5 common causes of the shoulder pain. Okay, so I'll be taking little bit of break, and then I'll be just arranging the volunteer, and then I'll be coming back, and I'll be showing you demonstrating on the volunteers. You can unmute yourself and you can ask me questions. So starting from the inspection. So in the inspection, what we are inspecting? We are inspecting some of the bony landmarks like clavicle, like the spine of the scapula, like the acromion. They're also looking about the muscles. How is the muscle starting from the pectoral muscles, the deltoid muscles, the supraspinatus muscles posteriorly, the supraspinatus muscles, interspinatus muscles. And then after the inspections, we should be palpating it. In the palpations, what was the steps? Number one is palpations of the bones and joints. So which bones? Starting from the clavicle, starting from the sternoclavicular joint, then calculate the whole of the clavicle up to the acromion, palpate the acromioclavicular joint, palpate the whole of the spine of the scapula, then palpate the glenohumeral joint. Glenohumeral joint can be palpated. Just palpate the humeral head, goes medially. You know, it is a round shape by the deep palpation. You can palpate the humeral head, go, and you can palpate your glenohumeral joint anteriorly. You can also palpate the glenohumeral joint posteriorly. Same way, just go on palpating the head of the humerus and go medially. You'll be able to palpate the glenohumeral joint. Then your acromioclavicular joint. So the four joints we told. One is the sternoclavicular joint, acromioclavicular joint, the glenohumeral joint, both anteriorly, posteriorly, and your facet joints. So facet joints palpate also very important part. Then comes is the muscle. In the muscle, both the muscle bulk or belly to find out any trigger points as well as the tendinous insertion points. So one important muscles here to palpate always is your trapezius, because that is one of the commonest cause of the myofascial pain. If you are talking about the whole of the body's myofascial pain, the commonest one is your trapezius. So palpate the trapezius nicely. Trapezius is like this. So to palpate trapezius, then deltoid is less common, and then you also palpate the insertion point. Insertion point. So here, if it is the bicipital groove, so here is your medial side is your just lateral to the coracoid is your where the lesser tuberosity, where your subscapularis muscle is inserted. So you can palpate that. You can palpate the supraspinatus muscles for trigger points, and then you can palpate where it is inserted just in the greater tuberosity. Remember, sit, supraspinatus, interspinatus, and teres minor, and also you can palpate the belly of the teres minor muscles and the interspinatus muscle, and the bursa around it, means where it is inserted. You can also palpate for the bursitis as well. So this is for the palpation. Then comes is your range of movement. So in the range of movement, we are having the flexion, extension, then is your abduction, adduction, and flexion in your abducted positions. In the abducted position, you can have the flexion and extension, and then is your internal and external rotation. So this is your internal rotation, this is your external rotation in the arm adducted positions, and also arm in the 90-degree abducted, you can have the internal rotation and external rotation. Okay, so this is the range of movement. Then comes is just let me go to the sequences. So in the range of movement, another very important thing is your apnea scratch test. So patient is asked to do the scratch test like this and as well as like this. So this is your apnea scratch test. So the range of motion is completed only with the apnea scratch test, and then comes the neurological examinations. In the neurological examinations, again, you have to remember the sensory, apart from the cranial nerves and the higher function test. So we should be starting with the sensory. Sensory, anterior part is by the supraclavicular. So the top and anterior part is by the supraclavicular nerve, the posterior by the suprascapular nerve, and laterally by the axillary nerve. So you should be starting with the either with the touch or with the different hot and cold sensation. We can go for this test. Then comes is your the test for the muscle power for the different rotator cuff muscles. So in that one was your empty can test. So in the empty can test, what was done? So patient was the thumb downwards and patient is asked to elevate the hand upward, and we are registering that. So this is your empty can test. Then was your belly press test. So this is your the belly press test, and in the muscle, another is your external rotation under resistance. So I'm pressing and asking the patient to rotate externally, and this is your for the three group of muscles. Infraspinatus and teres minor together is for this resisted external rotation. Belly press test for the subscapularis, and empty can test for the supraspinatus muscles. So these are the three important for the muscle motor test. And then comes is your the reflexes. So reflexes, I don't have the hammer here itself. So biceps is your 5. Then is your the supinator, is your the brachioradialis is your 6, and your triceps for the 7. Triceps, though not important for 7 is not important for the shoulder joint, but still sometimes we do it in combinations. But definitely 5 and 6 are very important. So biceps and the brachioradialis. So now comes is the special test. In the special test, what was there? Number 1 was your need test. So test for the impingement. In the need test, what was done? It was asking the patient to both actively as well as passively. So if it is done, if there is impingement, subacromial impingement, what will happen? The patient will be having the pain here and may not be able to do this completely. So this is your need test. Then comes is your Hawkins-Kennedy test. For that, you have to abduct it in 90 degree, hold it here, or hold it here like this, and then with another hand, we are doing the internal rotation and external rotation. So this is by stretching your subscapular muscle below the coracoid. So this is your for the subcoracoid. This is your subcoracoid impingement. Then comes is your the rotator cuff muscle. So for that, one is your, as I told you, the empty can test and the drop arm test is almost similar. So you are holding it and asking the patient to hold like this. So if the patient is having the supraspinatus pathologies or tear, complete tear particularly, patient will not be able to hold it and patient will be, hand will be dropped. So this is your drop arm test. So this is for your supraspinatus, and then is your infraspinatus and is your teres. So what it will be doing? So it will be at this the abducted positions. So we are rotating it posteriorly, and if the patient so patient will be when I'm sorry, it should be in this position, but because it is not coming in the camera, I'm just putting it down a little bit. So we are doing it and asking the patient to hold it. If the patient can hold it, then is your infraspinatus and teres minor is okay. But if the patient cannot hold it and it springs anteriorly, that is your external rotator lag sign. So that lag sign will be there in the infraspinatus and the teres minor pathologies or tear. So this is your for the rotator cuff. And then come is your what was there? What else was there? Just let me check once again what I am missing. Okay, then comes is your the instability. So the instability, so we are having the 3 tests together. Ideally, that should be done under with the patient, in a supine position, but again, I'm just showing you the sitting position. It is almost same. So I'm just showing you the sitting position. So first is patient will be supine and patient and patient will be hand will be 90-degree abducted and you are externally rotating it and pushing the hand, pushing the shoulder head, the humeral head from posteriorly, and the head, if it is unstable, it might be coming anteriorly, or in the apprehension test, what was happening? Patient was apprehending that it is coming out. So patient will not be allowing you to do that. And if you are relocating it, pushing it back, that is your relocation test. And if you are again, putting it and the anterior release test, that means in that positions you are releasing it, you are removing your hand, instead of doing the relocations, then again the patient will be having the apprehension. So basically it is your in 90-degree abducted positions, your external rotation. So in these positions there are two tests. One is your external rotation lag sign, that is for the supraspinatus and the teres tear. And if the patient is supine, if you are pushing it from the posteriorly, that is for the dislocation. If you are pushing it back, that is your relocation. And if you are releasing it and again doing it, so that is the release test. So these are the three important tests for the instability or having the dislocation. Then is your test for the acromioclavicular joint pathologies. So in the acromioclavicular joint pathologies, one important is your just having the tenderness over the acromioclavicular joint. And the second test was your O'Brien test. In the O'Brien test, patient's hand will be flexed anteriorly and both in the supination positions, ask the patient to lift and you are resisting it, and patient will be feeling pain here, then this is your O'Brien test. At the same test, if the patient is feeling pain here in the bicipital group, then that is your speed test. Otherwise, O'Brien and speed test is almost similar. But O'Brien test is having another version, that is you are pronating it, and again you are asking the patient to lift. So here, but you have to remember that this O'Brien test is also positive in the glenohumeral pathologies as well as in the labral tear. The O'Brien test might be positive. So O'Brien test and the local tenderness.
Abdullah, Khadija.
Okay, so the O'Brien test and the local tenderness is for the acromioclavicular pathologies. And the last special test was for the bicipital. So bicipital, one of them is speed test, already told. It should be in the supinated positions and patient will be asked to flex and lift. So this is your speed test. And another is your... Please unmute only when you are asking question. Otherwise, please don't unmute yourself. I have muted all of you. Okay. So now next is you are asking, I am holding like this and asking patient in the pronated position and asking the patient to supinate and not allowing it. So I am not allowing it. So this is your Yergassen test. So patient will be having pain along the bicipital group. So this is your test for the Yergassen test, and speed test is for the bicipital tendinopathies. Okay?
Sir.